Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So we're continuing our deep dive and analysis into this radical feminist book that enlightens us heavily on what it is they believe, and by me dissecting it line for line, essentially, we see how we can refute them, tackle their ideas, and understand their perspective, which helps for the acquisition of knowledge and truth to be found. Now, I did skip ahead some paragraphs because it was just platitudes, and it wasn't like the substance meat that I'm looking for. So, I am going to continue where I feel she kind of gets back into the flow of depth to her ideas. Bismillah. If you accept the idea that a woman has the absolute right to sexual choice, that she has a right to say no even if she's said yes before, even if she's naked in your bed, even if you've been married for 20 years, you must also wrestle with the prospect that she might not make the choice you want. That's the hill far too many men mistake for the moral high ground as they prepare to die on it. Now, I agree that a woman has the right to say no. There are a lot of young red pill Muslims and red pill Christians who think a woman, after she's married, has no more control over her body, and that she's evil and sinful if she says no. And the hadith that mentions the angels will curse the woman if the man goes to bed angry with her, and the hadith about woman should give it to her man even if they're on a camel and whatever, it really deals with ideals, right? A lot of people's sex drives fluctuate, relationships teeter, and some women even become asexual. They want sex less and less as time goes on. And they become bored with their partner, things become dull, right? It's just totally different the way men and women work. And so, when she mentions here that a woman, even if you've been married for 20 years, still has a right to choose whether she wants to have intimacy, I agree. The cult member, psychopath, the transformed wife, who Pearl Davis, Pearly Things, retweets, actually supports men violating women saying no. There was a post where a woman was asleep. She had already not consented. She said, I don't want to have intimacy. Going to bed, falls in a nice, comfortable sleep. Her husband crawls on her, shoves it in dry, and probably gave some tearing. You know, if you're not lubricated, you can actually tear. And a lot of Muslims, young Muslim men, unmarried, no capital, no children, living with their parents, who are addicted to BDSM porn, most likely, were saying that it's okay, it's not deviant or sadistic or bad manners for a man to just pounce on his wife while she's asleep after she said no. And one sister said in that comment thread that she's done with me because I don't support that, and I consider that to be a form of rape. Rape is when you do not want sexual contact and someone does it anyways after you've said no. Right? There's something about only that I didn't even know this was a thing, but in so many of these red pill Muslim circles, they literally dehumanize a woman once she becomes married. The fact that they think she can never say no, right? And how these male influencers in that manosphere lie and pretend their wives never say no. And if I had the ability, I would attach a lie detector test to those women, their wives, and really just look them in the eye and say, have you never once said no in your entire life to your husband for intimacy? Or you have some type of, you pay them money or something where you can know you can get the truth. Like, okay, what's the truth here? you know. I don't know how it works, but to tell the truth. But it's their private business, but it's just wrong that men think you're less of a man if your wife says no. When in reality, sometimes sleep is just better. And when the children are young, like from a newborn age to 1 year old, sleep is more important, I'd argue. You could become delirious and have severe postpartum depression. And some women, intimacy helps with that. Other times women are disconnected from their bodies and they think it's disgusting to have intimacy. And they just want to sleep. Right? And it's almost like when a man gets on a woman and she's like half asleep, it's like a dead body almost. It's so repulsive and repugnant that a man can be so selfish, ruled by his penis, that he would want to hump on someone who doesn't want it, who's resentful and rather sleep, and she's just doing it to get it over with and is probably hoping you're done. And she gets up unsatisfied and bored. It's really a burden for women. I feel really sorry for women in that regard. Just shows the difference of men and women that I've come to discover more and more over the years. When you're young, you know, I'm not old, but as you age, you just see more of like maturity and calmness and steadiness. You're not as wild and hormonal, you know, even men mellow down. But it's just really sad how some Christian cult members and red pill Muslim men, they really, for some reason, hate a woman saying what can happen to her body, what can penetrate her body. And that the young men say a sheikh with a miswak stick in his mouth laughs when he thinks about if his wife says no, that he's just gonna do it anyways. So violence against women in that regard is really sad. And you can't pin her down, but there's ways that you can coerce a woman and break her down through sex magic. And so when you become familiar with how sex is a weapon, the evil sides of it on the mental aspect of a female mind, and how some women weaponize neglecting that duty, and how some men can abuse women and then give them intimacy. For example, there's a good example of this in this show I watched when I was in my teens, Baby Boy, with Tyrese, whatever his name is, Tyrese Gibson, Tyrese, and he cheats on his woman constantly, gets in a fight with her, and then he has intimacy with her, takes her keys, and then goes and leaves, right? That's a classic scene of how sex is used as a weapon to mentally screw up women. And those women, when they leave those men, have a lot of problems they gotta go to therapy for. So the Andrew Tate types who brag about using sex as a weapon to break the minds of women. And then you have the other flip side of women not giving it to their men, and that breaks down his happiness and health and vitality. But nobody's trying to have a balance. It's really quite sad. So when I read something like this about sexual choice, I actually see it from a very nuanced perspective. But it is very popular to rile up young incel red pill Muslims and red pill Christian youths that they are this sort of King Kong imperial dictator who can ragdoll and use his woman as a doormat slave. And it's really apparent. Like, I didn't really know this at all in my life until I discovered the red pill Muslim community. So we can't criticize her in that regard when you actually start looking at what these young men say openly and proudly. The fact that I had argued with hundreds of messages in comment threads exchanged with these young men who are not trolling, they're actually really serious, because I see their accounts on red pill Muslim pages and whatnot, you begin to see, like, that's pretty scary. And it's freaky. It's really freaky. There's no sane person trying to mitigate and keep romance together. It's, for some reason, the woman has to just be a rag doll cum deposit box for her husband. There's no romanticism, chivalry, play, coyness, mingling. It's just not seductive or suave. It's just this arrogant, mean, occultic BDSM porn mind. It really takes a lot of research to kind of get what I'm saying at, but I know that there's people who are watching this video who will know exactly what I'm talking about, or who have been following me discussing this for quite some time. But it's a very touchy subject for young unmarried men who fear that their wife will go cold on them. So they focus on threatening and coercing and shaming a woman into having sex with them, instead of making her excited and then having patience and understanding the female mind and the female body, especially when the kids come in. And if you had a mature man who's actually wise, who's been married for 30 years, they'll tell you the truth how things slow down. You know, things slow down, things become more monotonous and sometimes boring, but that's okay because that's life. You know, there's just so much that could be said, but I've belated the point. We are surrounded by so many images of sexuality that it's easy to think of ourselves as liberated. But liberation, by definition, involves everyone. Okay, so she just admits we have so many images of sexuality. The fact that there are so many images shows that there has been some barriers that have been broken down. To a sad point. I mean, Lord of the Rings was wholesome. You could watch something as a family. HBO is famous for just interjecting scenes where you're like, you don't need this. We don't need sex in every scene. But it's almost like they disrespect men in a way, and they think of men as these disgusting penis monsters because they put sex has to be in there in order for men to watch, they think. Right? You have to get stimulated or they won't watch. And it's not very wholesome. So those barriers of decorum, of stuff you can watch with your family, has been broken down for some time. And the fact she's still not happy with that is like, you want more? You want more sex in society. Like, get it together, woman. Instead, the messages that bombard us from marketing and pop culture to mainstream pornography insist that acceptable desire, here she goes again, acceptable desire, goes only in one direction, from men to women. It's a homogeneous, dehumanizing vision of straight sex. So here again, she's attacking heterosexuals. So she brings up how it's from men to women, but I'd argue that right now, there are more youths going into adult entertainment, and that shows you that those women feel they've been liberated, and they're receiving the results of that. We're gonna watch as an experiment, how are these women who did that going to end up with families and children, and they're like, what's going to happen if they don't get married? How will it be when they're aging? Will we have a conservative boomerang? Right? So, I would argue female desire has been accepted by the secular liberal atheists and occultists. Right? A simple story where only men have agency. So here again, she's hinting at men having agency. Women have agency, but they express it in a different way. We've seen both in America, where women are the initiators, and then there's the passive, oh, I'm a damsel in distress, someone save me. And there are men who like the Amazonian, like Xena type. Xena was like a warrior show. She's like it's an old school show. But there's several styles of art where the woman is the initiator, but she's kind of like a Athenian, or a Trojan, something Roman lady. You get it? And then there's the, oh, I'm a very fairy tale princess Rapunzel, and I mean, I faint at the sight of a beard. And there's men who like both or just one, right? So I'd argue that women have always had agency. They've always had agency, and that it's actually expressed. But maybe there are men who hate women for proposing to men or going to their husband and initiating it. But I would argue that men would be quite pleased if their wife, was like, I want you, honey, or whatever. Or initiated it, right? I think there was a slang term for that called, oh, she's freaky, right? Kinky or whatever. And women are passive data points on a spectrum of affability. It's sexual license, not a liberation. So here we see she's calling it a license, not liberation. So here we see her in putting forth a new term for us. So remember, she wants women to have the absolute right of sexual choice. Okay. That in order to fully be liberated, everyone must be liberated, and that there shouldn't be acceptable desires. There has to be intimacy outside of heterosexuality. There has to be women having agency, not just men, and that one must be liberated and not just have sexual license. So I wonder what is going on in her mind where she feels the need to want to make people more hedonistic, It's always so puzzling how humans are focused so much on that. I think the character Varys from Game of Thrones had a fascinating line when he said, I don't want anything to do with desire because I see how desire destroys people. And I wonder what it would be like to take a pill or a medication or an injection where all sexual desire is eradicated. How that would affect somebody. Where you could turn off those hormones and what would your brain focus on instead? But yet it's part of a drive for us humans to take care of ourselves, to do self-grooming. I mean, the competition, it's so it's so ingrained in us, right? But I just wonder what it would be like if you could just escape that prison that leads to so much sin and problems in society. That is such a vice for humans. Fornication and adultery, it's such a big problem, right? And having to protect children from predators, I mean, it's quite scary. It's quite scary. Okay. I'll pause there, because there's a new topic here that she's going to go into, and I think that'll be great for another video. But let me know what you think. It's a very interesting book because it allows us to actually understand what it is we believe. It allows us to explore new ideas, but also to know where the boundaries are as Muslims and how they differ from us, these liberated feminists, and how you have to have a lot of patience when it comes to interacting with their content. It's not for the impulsive, highly emotional types. It's for people who are going to slow down and pick apart the statement. Let me know what you think. If you'd like to join my blog and support the channel, it's www.subscribestar.com. slash Milahan Archive. Hope to see you there.